in North Carolina and throughout the country. And this is the greatest response we've had to any of our webinars, and it's not surprising since Ilan Pappé is our guest. So we're glad that all of you are here. We hope to have time for a robust conversation, sharing questions and hearing from Ilan after his presentation. So before I introduce Ilan, let me say just a few words about Voices for Justice in Palestine. Some of you may not know much about us. I'm glad to share some information. We are a social justice nonprofit dedicated to a just and lasting peace in Palestine, Israel. We stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people in their quest for liberation, justice, and equal rights. We believe in a shared future for all the people living between the river and the sea, based on freedom, self-determination, and equality for all. Locally, here in North Carolina, in the Triangle area especially, we are active in community education, congregational retreats and webinars, legislative advocacy, marches, rallies, panel discussions, and media presence. You can find out more about us at our website, vjp.org, and on Facebook and Instagram. We gratefully welcome your financial support for our work. You can find easy ways to donate on our platforms, and we truly appreciate it. Just a word about the flow of this afternoon's webinar. Dr. Pappé will speak with us for about 45 minutes on the theme, Is the Zionist Experiment Unraveling, and whatever else is on his mind. After his presentation, we'll close after his presentation, we'll open it for questions from the audience, and we will close at 3:30. We want that to be a hard stop to request Dr. Pappé's time. He is in the UK, so that's 8:30 there. So we'll stick to that 3:30 close for us here at Eastern Time. Our outreach coordinator and communications director, Kate Newman, will be at the controls, is at the controls as we speak. And Kate has a few words for the process that we'll be following on the webinar. Kate, please tell us what we need to know.
Hi all, thank you so much for being here. Sorry, my camera's not working today, so I can't be on camera, but I am so thrilled about this event and just wanted to let you all know that our policy that we have learned works best for webinars is to keep all questions till the very end, as Mark mentioned, but we also turn the chat off while our speaker is speaking because we just find that it can get very distracting. So if you have any thoughts you want to share, you can write them down, make a note, and make sure to come back to it. I will reopen the chat when it's time for questions, but we will also go through and we will ask questions directly to Ilan. So you'll raise your hand if you have something that you'd like to ask, and Mark will call on you directly in the order of hands raised for as long as we have. And again, we just ask you to keep it, relatively short and sweet since we do have a lot of folks here today. And of course, we're all going to be excited to get to have this conversation. So thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you, Kate. Briefly, before we begin, I'd like to invite Dr. Burhan Ganayem, who is the chair of our board of directors, and Burhan will bring us a welcome from our organization. Burhan.
I'm going to make it short here. I wanted to welcome all of you on behalf of Mark and Kate, who did most of the work. And they just invite me to be one of the people who are here. And I wanted to thank all of you. I see many faces here that are supporters and many new faces. So those two new people that are joining us today, thank you, thank you. I wanted to thank Ilan Pappé for making it here with us today. This means a lot to me personally, to our organization. So on behalf of the board, let us enjoy this conversation and let us learn from Pappé about the subject. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Burhan. Now it's my great honor to introduce Professor Ilan Pappé. He's known, no doubt, to all of us, but let me just give you these basics. He is the director of the European Center for Palestine Studies at the University of Exeter and a senior fellow at the University of Exeter's Institute for Arab and Islamic Studies. He is also the chair of the board of the charity, the Nachba Memorial Foundation. Ilan Pappé was born in Haifa in 1954. He received his Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Oxford in 1984. From 1984 to 2006, Pappé taught at the University of Haifa and moved to the UK in 2007 to the University of Exeter in the UK. Ilan has written 22 books to date. I think that might still be growing. Among them, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, a classic, and on Palestine, jointly with Noam Chomsky in 2010. His most recent books are The 10 Myths of Israel, The Biggest Prison on Earth, A History of the Israeli Occupation, A Historical Dictionary of Palestine, with Johnny Mansour in 2021, and Our Vision for Liberation with Ramzi Baroud in 2022. His soon-to-be classic, very influential, Lobbying for Zionism on Both Sides of the Atlantic in 2024. And I would also mention A Very Short History of the Israel-Palestine Conflict, also in 2024, something I found very useful working with groups who are new to the issue. And then, of course, the one that's focused our attention especially is Israel on the Brink, the 8 revolutions that could lead to decolonization and coexistence, and that is 2025. So that's just a smattering of everything that could be said about Dr. Pappé and his influence on this movement. I will say on a personal note, Ilan, I was really privileged to hear you for the first time in person when I went to Israel Palestine in 2013 with Friends of Sabeel North America and Tree of Life, and it was an honor to be in your presence. Great for all of us to have this opportunity. Let me turn it over to you. Again, our warmest thanks for your presence, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Burhan, and thank you, everyone who and Kate who made this event.
Ilan, I don't think we're hearing you.
You're not. Oh, I see. But
Maybe move closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
I hear him.
That's better.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Even is that okay now? The voice
Yes.
the voice level
Thank
is
you.
fine. Good.
That's
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you again for the Voices for Justice in Palestine, the organization. Hearing your biography or CV, Mark, it makes me realize again what does it mean to be 71. I forgot about it today, but thank you for mentioning it. So I suddenly see a long history there. Yes, thank you for giving me also the opportunity to discuss an issue which is still brooding in my mind. I'm still cooking, in a way, this dish. This is not a kind of final product, but it's one that I feel maybe also due to age, but also given the terrible and horrific situation on the ground in Palestine, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, probably the worst chapter in the modern history of Palestine, even compared to 1948, which was by itself a horrific year in the modern history of the country. It doesn't even compare to the Nakba, to my mind, what goes on today and what had been going on or has been going on in the last 3 years. And because of that, I decided to write the book Israel on the Brink, to bring the issues to public debate, even before I was fully at peace with myself of articulating clearly and finally some of these points. So the urgency is very much a motive here for discussing these issues, and even if they come at the expense of not fully completing the necessary process of thought that I think still needs to be completed in order to articulate even better what can be done and should be done in order that these last 3 years would not be followed by another 3 years of the same kind. And what we see and is most worrying is not only that there is no movement for improvement. It seems that all the factors that are really making life for so many millions of people, not only in Palestine, also in Lebanon and in Syria, almost impossible, under constant danger of being displaced, killed, and wounded, that all these factors that contributed to this inhuman consequence are not only still intact, they are in many ways they are intensified every passing day, and the near future looks even worse in that respect because of the failure in many ways of those who initiated these policies, whether it's the genocide in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, the attack on Iran, the occupation now, not we call it the occupation of South Lebanon, but Israel, the Israeli army is much more, in the last 2 days, went over into the central of Lebanon, probably would go even further, to my mind, as far as Beirut. And that the failure of these strategies bring with them more cruelty, more brutality, more suffering, and immiseration of the people involved. Right now, as we speak, there are 6 million people in the Middle East, 2 million in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, 1 million in Lebanon, 3 million in Tehran. We have 6 million people who are refugees because of these policies. So we need to face this calamity, but also, and this is what I'm trying to do in the book and what I will try to do today, believe that there are counter processes that will change the reality. This is not hope for the sake of hope. This is an analysis of prospects or processes that are already underway, but they are not very intensive, and some of them can be intensified by our own actions, and therefore contribute to a transformation that is deeply needed, as everybody would understand if you follow closely what's happening in Palestine and near Palestine, in the Levant, in the Eastern Mediterranean. So this is the preface for the need I felt for putting this book forward, but also the discussion. The book is just a teaser for a discussion that I think is very, very important. Now, the kind of contradiction that I will bring to the fore is that on the one hand, I've just described a destructive machine of the state of Israel, running over millions of people, destroying their houses, killing them, killing their children and women, taking over the land, displacing them, in some cases replacing them as they did in the past with Jewish settlers. On the other hand, I claim that exactly this fierce, brutal, uninhibited policy is an indication that this project is towards the end of its duration. This is not a unique case in history. If you look at the last days of the apartheid regime in South Africa, for instance, in the last days of the regime, when it was already suffering from internal and external pressure that made it less and less sustainable, the regime became even more brutal and fierce in its oppression of the ANC and the black people, African people of South Africa. So, and this is not the only example. The French, before they left Algeria, were particularly brutal and ruthless, and I think that there is a correlation between level of brutality, inhumanity, on the one hand, and the inability to sustain a certain project that can only be sustained by force and more force and more force. So let us look at the possibilities that this project is coming to an end. First of all, we should be aware that historically speaking, processes of ending a regime, of decolonization, of disintegration are usually very slow to begin with, and they tend to accelerate towards the point in which a transformation occurs. We are definitely not at the point of acceleration yet. We are at the beginning of these processes, and therefore they are very slow, but they are detectable. And the reason this project is not sustainable has a lot to do with the origins of the project. And it's a good moment to remind ourselves what were the circumstances, what were the impulses behind turning an Arab country that was part of the Ottoman Empire, that has a large Christian community next to a Muslim majority, that was organically connected to the rest of the Arab world, where the Jews who lived in it regarded themselves both as Arabs and as Jews and as part of the Islamic civilization. What were the impulses? What was the drive to turn a very clear reality of who the people who lived there are? What was the country like? What was its nature? What was its history? What was its connection with the area around it? What made people in Europe believe that they had the power, the permission, I would say even, the moral right to turn such a country into a European Jewish state? That is the core of the problem. And the problem has not yet been solved, because if you impose a European Jewish state at the heart of the Arab world, at the heart of the Muslim world, at the expense of the indigenous people of Palestine, you can only do it by force. And if you want to sustain it, you can only sustain it by force. Unless, of course, you give up the idea that what you need is to replace an Arab country with a European Jewish state. But of course, Zionism, from the very beginning until today, does not believe that there's any alternative from turning Palestine from an Arab country to an exclusively Jewish state, although I don't believe it's a Jewish state. My Judaism does not, what I believe is Jewish is not what I see in the state of Israel, but that's probably something for a different kind of lecture sometime in the future. Is Israel really a Jewish state? But let's not divert from that and say that this whole idea could only be imposed by force, because there was no chance in the world for a local indigenous population to accept such a total transformation of who they are, of the country in which they lived. But even more, even if they would have accepted it, very early on they understood, and a bit later they experienced the connection between this idea of transforming a country's culture and identity and the project of displacement and replacement of the indigenous people. Or put more bluntly, as scholars of settler colonialism do, that the only way of such a huge transformation of a country could be done by elimination of the native. And you live in a country that has experienced a similar vision with a similar brutality towards the indigenous people in that part of the world. So it's not unique. What is unique that you can, with all the kind of limitations that exist in American universities and maybe in the American public discourse, you can still mention that the United States was a settler colonial project that had led to the elimination of many of the Native Americans. Maybe not everybody would happy to know it or to engage with it, but nonetheless, this is not a fact that is denied anymore. What is so unique about Israel is that the very simple, straightforward framing I'm putting in front of you, namely that the project in essence was a settler colonial project, namely taking Europeans to a non-European country, forcing it to become a European state by displacing and replacing the indigenous population, is not a very complicated concept. And the reason it's not a complicated concept is because it was tried and executed elsewhere in the world. It's something that came with European imperialism and colonialism, came also European settler colonialism. On the edges of the classical colonialism, of building European colonial powers, came these groups of settlers who were not very welcome in Europe itself, and later didn't want to belong to the empires, and created the new nationalities, as you know, in the Americas, in Australia, in Africa, in some places, and in Palestine, claiming to be Europeans but not living in Europe itself. And the only way they could have done it was by totally destroy the local population, own its own history, appropriate its own folklore, appropriate its own history, even as far as that, and making sure that the past is erased as well as the people. You can talk about it when you talk about many parts of the world, as you probably know, and even where you live in the United States or in Canada, or wherever you're joining us from, there are still places that this kind of, as I say, very straightforward, very simple, but very solid analysis of what Zionism is all about, in many places would be regarded as an anti-Semitic statement. You might be accused by using the language I use, by the simple phrases I employed in order to describe the essence of the Zionist project. It is still unbelievable that it is still regarded as, by many, as a position that is equivalent to anti-Semitism or Holocaust denial, or in my case, to a self-hating Jew position. It is changing in many places, but not everywhere. And I think that's part of the reason we have to talk about that history and put it in front of people, because this is not a nostalgic journey into the past. This is a part of history which is very relevant for understanding what's happening in Palestine today and what might happen in Palestine in the future. So if we start of talking about fundamental problems in the Zionist project, let's not forget the way it was conceived, the way it was installed, and do remember all the time, you needed a very powerful coalition to make it a reality, and you needed another powerful coalition to sustain it. The coalition, to begin with, was made of certain groups in evangelical Christianity. Once, I think we will call them today Christian Zionists, British imperialists, Jewish nationalists who actually accepted the anti-Semitic image of Judaism as a non-European nationalism, or a different race than the European race, internalized this anti-Semitic idea and said, yes, you're right, we're a different nation, we're a different race, and we need a homeland. So we're going back to the Holy Land in Palestine. This connection between imperialism, Christian Zionism, Jewish nationalism, if you want, was powerful enough to create a lobby on both sides of the Atlantic that, first of all, pushed Britain to occupy Palestine as part of the campaigns of the First World War, and then to not only to make Palestine British, but to make it also a Zionist state. And this is something that was wrong on so many levels that it's not surprising that it comes to bite us today. So that's a kind of a general picture of what is wrong with this project and why probably there are serious, extensive cracks in the foundation of this project. And the reason is, as I say, if you want, the way it was built. You build something on the basis of violence, of dispossession, of ethnic cleansing, then you have to sustain it with similar methods. And of course, the people themselves who are the victims of these policies are not passive. They create their own resistance to these policies. The resistance cannot remain nonviolent for long. And the violence of the resistance, of course, justifies in the eyes of the colonizer, the occupier, and the ethnic cleanser to escalate its own violence by saying that actually it only responds to the violence of the native people in order to create an historical narrative that, of course, starts with the reaction of the colonized to the colonization, not with the colonization itself. And there's something we should insist on when we talk with people about the history of Palestine. We don't have to ignore the fact that there's violence on both sides, but we have to make people distinguish clearly between the symptoms of violence and the origin of violence. As, of course, we should see the difference between violence used by an oppressor and violence used by the oppressed. Secondly, I would like to say that the 7th of October 2023 attack of the Hamas on Israel was a bit like an earthquake shattering a building that already had extensive cracks in its foundations. What it did, it kind of exposed, on one hand, it exposed the very serious weaknesses of the Zionist project, but it also exposed other things. It exposed the weakness of the international legal system, the weakness of international political system. Actually, this brought further escalation in the disintegration of international politics with the attack later on Venezuela and Iran and so on. But it's all connected. It's all connected to Gaza, to my mind. And so it both exposed the cracks in the Zionist foundation, if you want, of the State of Israel, but also exposed the international community's cohesion that allowed the Zionist project to thrive and develop. And therefore, there is a connection between the disintegration of international law and international politics and the potential disintegration of the Zionist project, because the one needs the other. Namely, if you want it in a different way, to sustain an Israel that continues to control the life of millions of Palestinians against their will, to sustain an Israel that is all the time in a situation of war with its neighbors, that would like to control the south of Lebanon, even more of Lebanon, the south of Syria, and has even ambition towards Jordan. To sustain an Israel that wants to be the dominant and hegemonic power, and therefore would not hesitate, as it didn't hesitate in the last few years, to bomb any Arab capital at will. To sustain that kind of a state and a mini empire, if you want, you need a certain international political environment. And of course, the Trump administration, certain right-wing governments in the West, the kind of politics that the global South in very important countries like China and India bring with it, and Russia, are all conducive to a situation by which Israel feels that it has the military balance on its advantage to continue these policies, and on the other hand, does not have to fear an international system that might put a stop to its policies. But I think that's where it's wrong. It's wrong because this international system that definitely now is very conducive for the kinds of policies that both the United States and Israel are executing in the Middle East is also crumbling, is also not sustainable. You could see that it's not working on so many fronts, and it creates problems that led people who were part of this coalition, like some people on the right in the United States, to rethink whether that is exactly the project that even serves their own perception of what is the right political, or if you want, what is the national interest of the United States in this particular case. So let me be more structured in describing these extensive cracks as I see them, and then say something about what can be the antidote, not to the cracks themselves, because I think they are inevitable. I do think this building is collapsing. Nobody can stop it from collapsing, from disintegrating. But we need to think about the alternative, because a collapse does not necessarily bring with it a better building unless we are strategizing for a better building instead of the one that is malfunctioning in this case. I think without prioritizing the importance of the cracks, I would enumerate some of them, as I do in my book, and I won't go too much into details, but at least you'll have an overview of those cracks, which I think I'm detecting, again, not as wishful thinking, not as an activist, but as an analyst. One is the implosion of the Israeli Jewish society from within. The Zionism created two challenges, actually. The first challenge we talked about, challenged the idea that you can create an exclusive, pure Jewish state instead of Palestine is not working. Palestinians are there, the resistance are there, the world is there. This is not something that is going to work. But Zionism posed another challenge. It decided to define a religion as nationalism. It decided to define Judaism as religion, and not just define Judaism as nationalism, and not just nationalism, as a very romantic version of nationalism, one based on blood, on race, not on common shared interest, let's say, in humanity or civil rights or human rights, but one that is very much modeled on the very European nationalism that caused the worst kind of anti-Semitism in Europe. It is as the famous German dissident and composer Otto Klemperer said, the Zionists took the venom that bite them and adopted it themselves. And that is the venom of romantic nationalism. And what it meant is that there was a big question: what does it mean to be a Jewish? What does it mean to have a Jewish state, regardless now with the question, how does it deal with the challenge of deciding to have a Jewish state in Palestine? And for a while, because of this conflict with the Palestinians, the conflict with the Arab world, and because it was a young state, there was a sense that it doesn't matter. It's not a very important question, until it became the most important question for the Jewish society. What does it mean to be a Jewish state if it's a secular Jewish state? What does secular Judaism mean at all? Now, individually, of course, or in small groups, or when it's not a national identity, people have such a kind of plethora of options of decide what the religion is, which is wonderful. Of course, you can be a Christian Jew and you can be a very Orthodox Jew. It works, of course, it works for communities, it works for individuals. The spectrum is endless and should be respected, of course, by everyone. But imagine that you have to decide it for a state, for a nation. Then the flexibility is over. Either it's a theocratic state, Or Judaism doesn't mean much in the public sphere because it becomes just an individual way of exercising your faith. And what happened is that while the secular Jews somehow thought that they were the majority, that they were dominating Israel, that they're not a Jewish society, they're an Israeli society, whatever that means, which has a lot to do with not being an Arab, came a group of people, first who came from the Arab countries, and then group of people who grew in the Jewish settlements in the West Bank after 1967, who said, no, this is not a Jewish state. Tel Aviv is not part of a Jewish state. A Jewish state is one that reenacts the way a Jewish state, they believed, was in action, if you want, during the biblical times and before the occupation of the Romans in the beginning of times. And this kind of battle between a theocracy, a Jewish state as a theocracy, and a Jewish state as a liberal democratic state, be it an apartheid state towards the Palestinians, is insoluble. And what even before the 7th of October, the moment which happened in November 2022, the theocratic view of Israel as a Jewish state became the most important dominant political power in the state. This was not anymore an intellectual debate of who is a Jew. It became a battle in the street of who is a Jew. And if you read the main literature that is produced by those who are now dominating not only the Israeli political system, the army, the security service, the educational system, the media in many ways, and now they're battling for taking over the judicial system and the academia as well. If you look at their literature, the secular Jew is as bad as a Palestinian in their perspective, as redundant on the way for a glorious future that territorially is not limited to historical Palestine, has to expand over many parts of the neighboring states. And that kind of vision that used to be on the lunatic fringes, if you want, of Israel, is now very much hegemonic. And it created such almost a civil war, I would say, that the battle is now not much fought anymore because a huge number of the people who oppose that kind of definition of Israel as a Jewish state have left. We don't have the numbers, but we are talking about a huge chunk of the population that has emigrated in the last 4 years. We don't have the numbers. We know only one number that was published, which is 100,000 members of the elite. That is the professionals of Israel that have left the country with their capital. But the numbers are far greater than this. And remember, the whole population is 8 million Jews. So don't think in terms of an American population, right? So this is a huge chunk that would leave Israel without its elite and very much exposed as a fanatical, messianic, theocratical state. The second crack is the economic crisis looming. Not right now. Not right now. Somehow on macroeconomic kind of terms, Israel is doing quite well. But if you look a bit deeper into the economy of war that Israel is engaged with in the last 3 years, you can see, for example, that while in the past it was enough to get $3 billion a year from the United States to sustain the economy, now Israel needs $14 billion of the American taxpayer to at least be able to continue with the economy of war. Will America provide it in the future? It's a big question. You don't have to be a pro-Palestinian person in America to question whether this is a good use for the American taxpayer money, whether it's a successful investment. But it's more than that. The war economy needs a war coalition, and the war coalition needs to satisfy financially certain section in the Israeli Jewish society at the expense of the general public. So there is less money to the public services, to the educational system, to the social welfare, and therefore the gap between the rich and the poor is growing exponentially in the last few years, because there are sectors that are being peppered, or pampered rather, with money in order to get the vote for the next election. This is a very unhealthy economic system that could not be sustained for long. There is a third crack, which is the exhaustion of the Israeli army. It's not a secret that the Israeli military is now unbelievable. Only if you are on the ground in Israel, you can probably appreciate it. I'm not sure you can see it from the United States. But there is a hunting campaign in Israel to catch Orthodox Jews and impose on them military conscription. The army has put it in a very bare kind of form. It said, without 10,000 soldiers, which are to be found in the ultra-Orthodox community of Israel, we don't have enough manpower to fulfill our strategic ambitions to defeat the Hamas, to defeat Hezbollah, to occupy South Lebanon, to go to an additional war with Iran. This army will not be able to face not only a conventional war with its neighbors, but even a threat of a conventional war. I say because I'm a pacifist. I really don't want Israel to be defeated militarily. I'm not looking for that. But I do think a very different kind of position by Egypt and Jordan, that does not necessarily have to be a military confrontation, but a different kind of assertive position would bring home, at least to some Israelis, the fact that an army that was unable to defeat two small guerrilla movements, it's quite questionable how can it face a conventional army if it will continue in the same trajectory that it's going through. We have another crack, which is the international community. Israel is now a pariah state. It is true that the governments and political elites and the mainstream media is still unwilling to heed what their societies ask them to do with regard to Israel. But we've been there before with the solidarity movement with the ANC during the apartheid of South Africa. It took a lot of time before the civil society actions of boycott and solidarity eventually influenced the governments to move to policies of sanctions and pressure, direct pressure, on the apartheid regime in South Africa. This is an historical process, and we've already seen some of the, I would say, outcome of this pressure. Not enough, of course. Unfortunately, this is nothing I can bring to people in Gaza or the West Bank by telling them, now there are some politicians that heed the movement of solidarity, because it doesn't stop as yet the killing of one Palestinian in Gaza or the expulsion of one Palestinian in the West Bank. But nonetheless, historically speaking, this is going on. It's unstoppable. And elections of a mayor in New York, of a certain representative in the United States, the position of the Spanish government, the voices that we hear from opposition parties in different parts of the world, are all indication that I don't think Israel is going to divert from this orientation I describe of a theocratic, aggressive, destructive state in its relationship with the Palestinians in the region. It's very likely that more governments, more states would go in the same direction that has been charted already by millions of people in the global civil society with regard to Palestine. And I also hope, and I hope this is not this wishful thinking, that the many, many young people who joined the encampments in the campuses, joined the marches of millions in Rome and in London, and the marches in the United States, the many young people who boarded the flotillas to Gaza, some of them would be the politicians of the future. And I think that they are not going to divert or forget what was their moral position on Palestine when they were still part of the society and less part of the political establishment. And we need that change that they will bring with them, not just in order to save Palestine and liberate it, but also for the sake of other issues of injustice in our world, whether it's ecological justice, social justice, economic justice, something that our politicians right now, with the danger of generalization, are not up to dealing with, because they are far more self-centered and career-minded than thinking about these issues in any serious way, and we need a different kind of politics. Now, there's also a different kind of Jews from Zionism, not only their ability to define the Judaism without connection to Israel, but seeing their responsibility to do it through support for the Palestinian struggle is a growing phenomenon. It was very much on the margin 10 or 15 years ago, but it's very, very much an acute kind of process today. And I should say right now that all these discrete processes by themselves cannot make the change. But history teaches us that they can fuse together and be a very powerful, transformative factor in changing the reality on the ground. Finally, as I said, I'm not enumerating all these cracks. I'm trying to sort of focus on the important ones. There are two other ones, and with this I would finish this kind of exposure before saying briefly something about antidotes. One is that the Arab world is going through a revolution. The revolution has not succeeded in 2011, 2012, but it's not over. It's not over. There are millions of people in the Arab world who are not happy with their political systems, with their rulers, and one of the points of grievousness is the position on Palestine. And this will change. And a different kind, I think, of pan-Arab politics would be a factor also in determining the future of Palestine and Israel. And the second one is the Palestinian national movement itself. Right now, it is, in political terms, disunited, fragmented, and not in a very good moment in its history, undoubtedly. But if you listen to the younger Palestinian generation, which should remember the Palestinian is one of, wherever they are, one of the youngest society in the world. And if you tap into their conversations, into their dreams, into their aspiration, into their political activism, you can see that they are preparing a different kind of a national movement in the future. It will take time to mature. It will not happen in a day. But a united Palestinian movement with a clearer orientation about what is the vision for the future could be in the driver's seat for many people in the solidarity movement, and that could change the whole trajectory of what nowadays is wrongly called the peace process or the conversation on the day after, which is totally led by Israelis and Americans and their allies. And that's why it's going nowhere. The only way of thinking about who can lead the conversation, not just about dismantling an apartheid Southeast Asia. In order to make sure, you need a united Palestinian leadership in the driver's seat, taking us towards a better future, which also includes the necessity of the Palestinians in Israel, which usually are being forgotten, 2 million Palestinians, to change their strategy. And right now, they are playing both in the Israeli political field and the Palestinian political field, but such a duality is impossible, I think, would be impossible in the future. More united with the Palestinian political effort to rearrange a united Palestinian national movement with a clear vision, I hope, of one democratic, decolonized state in the future. So that's another, I think, it's a crack in the wall because Zionism, the way it is now exercised, and the way that now it feeds the visions of most Israelis for the future is based on this constant assumption that the Palestinians are over, they're being wiped out, that they don't count anymore. And whenever they find out that this is not the case, they use horrific methods to try and make that a reality. And you can see it in the behavior of Israel in the West Bank in the last 2 years, and of course the genocide in Gaza. But this is not going to work. And the question is, what kind of Palestinian movement would lead us, not tomorrow, the day after, but 10, 15 years from now? And I think that would be a crucial factor, as I say, not only in changing the reality, but offering a different kind of reality. And now let me finish by saying that some of these processes that I call the beginning of the end of the Zionist project, and I go to the beginning of my lecture, it's inevitable that we will be in this moment in history. It's impossible to impose such a new reality by violence and force. This is not a reality that naturally emerged out of the country of Palestine. This is an imposition, a European solution for a European problem that is not working, that did not solve the problem in Europe and did not solve the problem in Palestine itself. So not surprising that this is not working. The question is, can we avoid it collapsing in such a violent manner as we see it today? That's the big question, because we should care about those who are victims of these collapse. Now the victims are mostly Palestinians and Lebanese, but you know, if this collapse is not going to end well, the victims could be also the Jews who live now in Israel. They should be aware of it as well. Decolonization is not always a walk in the park or a pharmaceutical process. History teaches us that it can be also very violent by itself, but you can prevent it if you are willing to be part of the process of decolonization that leads to reconciliation based on restorative justice and so on, which I don't have time to enter into the various mechanisms. We might talk about it in the questions in the Q&A. Let me finish by saying that some of these processes, I say, are inevitable. Many of these processes have nothing to do with activism. We have no power over them. They are happening. Some of these processes, especially those who can make sure that this process can end in a positive way, we have a lot to say about it. We have a share in them, whether it's the BDS movement, whether it is encouraging unity on the Palestinian side, whether it's changing the positions of governments in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, in the global north, in the global south, whether we can more clearly connect our struggles for injustices in our own countries with the injustice in Palestine. All of these is something that many of us are involved with, but we haven't found yet, I think, the proper structure for making the solidarity, which is so widespread like never before, into a real powerful political movement that overcomes the kind of problems that fractured the left in the past, where people were unable to put aside disputes which were irrelevant for the cause that they were fighting for. And we need to understand and be in a constant dialogue with the various groups that are so important for our struggle for liberation and justice, the Muslim communities in the United States, in the West. All of this has to be talked about, discussed, and there's a way of creating a dialogical situation by which the rainbow coalition that brought 1 million people in many places to a demonstration would be a 1 million movement that can act daily as a solidarity movement with the Palestinians, hopefully with a clear directive helping to liberate the people, make them free from the river to the sea, and all those who were expelled to come back and build the kind of Palestine that was there actually, in many ways, before 1948. when Muslim and Christian and Jews coexisted. I'm not romanticizing the coexistence, but it was a coexistence that enabled to deal with most of the problems in life. And Palestine was what organically, culturally, and historically part of what we call in Arabic the Mashriq, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Levant, part of its problems and part of its solutions. So I think I'll stop here so we have half an hour at least for discussion. Thank you.
Ilan, thank you so much. What an amazing tour you've given us as a historian of the origins of the violence and everything that's inherent in the conflict that keeps the violence happening, and yet at the same time bringing us some hope, not only from inevitable historical processes, but also a roadmap of the kinds of things we could be working on to avoid the worst outcomes and hopefully the best ones. So it was really a wonderful lecture, and thank you so much. I'm going to, I'd be delighted to talk with you for hours, but I'm going to tame myself and open it up for everyone else. And at this point, I see the hands. If people want to use uh, the hand sign in the chat, that's fine. If you can also raise your hand or try to get my attention. Both Kate and I will be tracking the questions. And again, as she said, please keep your comments brief, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So the first
Mark,
one
may
I
suggest
saw.
that I will take,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, may I say I will take 3 questions in a row, or comments,
Oh, good.
and
I
respond after 3 of them. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
that's great.
yeah.
Now I know where Josh Rubner got that tactic. He did that with us too. He took 3 at a time.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, he had a good teacher. Yes.
Yes. All right. So these are
Okay.
the 3 that I see at the top here. Judith Firster is first, then Barbara Taft, and then Laura Gibney, and then we'll keep going. So thanks everyone. Judith, Barbara, and Laura in that order. Ilan will take your questions and then respond. So, Judith,
You're muted, Judith.
there you go. Still, now you go. Unmuted.
Okay.
Good.
When I read the book, I have to juxtapose it with the Lord of the Flies behavior that we're seeing from settlers. And one of the things you say in the book is that, when the refugees return, we'll need housing. And there's all this wonderful housing in the settlements. And so we just open it up to returnees. But who would want to live with these people? They're so violent and racist that I really fear for what the settlers can do. I mean, what they're doing to the West Bank and the people who live there now, and how they would be part of a one democratic state. I don't understand.
Thank you, Judith. Barbara, next.
Okay, I actually have 2 quick questions. One of them is, can you return to Israel? And when you do, how are you treated? And the second one is that a recent U.S. requirement for peacemaking is that various Arab states all join the Abraham Accords. How would that play out in this?
Okay, that's a total of 3. Do you want to take those 3 or add also Laura's? That would be 4.
I think that was
Let's
just
add
2,
Laura.
actually.
Let's add Laura.
Okay.
Yes.
Laura, you're next. So you take it.
Okay, 2 strands of your argument. One is, like many people, you make comparisons with South Africa and other experiences with decolonization, but I always have a hard time with that, in that I do feel like this is a completely different circumstance. Every circumstance is particular, but this one, both the origins of the state and also having this massive implication of foreign powers who are implicated in the Israel state, and they have a reason for wanting to sustain it. And they have, immensely powerful lobbies, including evangelicals who have a religious zealotry attached to this. So that's one. And the other thing I just want to say is when you're talking about the movement of resistance growing, and I've been part of it for a long time, and I love that, but it's still a pretty small movement. And moreover, I see it's kind of really died down. And, even though we're still in the middle of the genocide, people are already completely exhausted and it's really died down. So sometimes I have a little bit of a hard time sharing in kind of this kind of optimism that Israel's on its last legs as a Zionist state.
Yeah, thank you. Let me start with the first one. Yeah, in the book, actually, because the book also has an
Ilan,
imagined.
speak closer
Yeah,
to the mic. I
sorry.
think
Yeah,
you're
okay.
breaking
Sorry.
up a bit.
Yeah, is that better? Still not good?
Yeah.
It's good.
Try that. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I don't know what happened to the mic today. Anyway, okay, I'll raise my voice so that in the book I also have an imagined part, which I think is a clue to your questions. I don't think that the Jews in Israel would go along with decolonization. I don't claim it anywhere. I don't think there are dynamics of change in Israel. What I claim is that the Jews who would decide to stay in a decolonized Palestine would be Jews who reconciled for the need for a change. There is a passage in the book in which I have an imaginary conversation with a grandson who asks me, what happened to all these Jews who lived next to us in Haifa? They have left. And I said to him, yes, they left because they couldn't live in a country in a state which is not an apartheid state, and I'm very sorry about it. But that was not a precondition for liberating the country. So in many ways, any Jew who would stay in a decolonized, liberated Palestine is similar to a white person in South Africa, who I remember so many of them told me when I visited there in 2014 that they were against apartheid. Every white person I met in South Africa told me that they were against apartheid. So I said, if you all were against apartheid, why did it take so long to bring it down? So I do believe that people are, there is a theory of political science. You need to change the position of 10% of the population to get a different political reality. So I don't think that the people that are now the terrible, brutal settlers are the ones that would share the country with the Palestinians. So what I meant was not that they would share the country. I would say that millions of Jews cannot disappear, and those who hopefully would one day come to the realization it's either staying in a democratic state or not living in a democratic state, but that's up to them. As for for myself, yes, no, I can go to Israel. I'm an Israeli citizen still. I do believe of the struggle from within. They do allow me. I'm an Israeli citizen, so I think the harassment occurs here and there. But as long as I can, I'm going back. I have to be there to be part of that movement, because even if we are very, very small number of anti-Zionist Israeli Jews, I think our presence is very important in the long run, whatever the price we have to pay for this. As for yes, the Abraham Accord. This is not, of course, a peace accord. This is an attempt to convince the Arab countries to normalize the occupation, to normalize the colonization, to normalize the ethnic cleansing. And the quid pro quo for this is a very good alliance with the United States. I think there is a lot of rethinking in the Arab world whether the alliance with the United States was a very good idea. You talk to people in the Gulf and ask them whether the Abraham Accord is something that defended them from the worst year in their history as shakedoms of petrol. They are experiencing something that in the worst nightmares they didn't think would happen. And it happens, and they know that this is not happening because of Iranian aggression. This is happening because of an American-Israeli aggression. Let's wait and see what the Arab world would learn from this. Because one thing is clear, alliance with Israel and the United States does not bring you stability. It does not bring you peace and does not bring you security. So I think the Abraham Accord has been already on the way to the dustbin of history, and it's just a matter of time. As for South Africa, I agree that there are many dissimilarities, but it is important to focus on what I said. I didn't say the situation is similar. I said that a certain transition in the movement of solidarity from civil society to governments inspires the BDS movement, and rightly so. Namely, the BDS movement is now at the state of the boycott and divestment and is looking for the S, for the sanctions. And the model that inspired it was the model of solidarity with South Africa. Let's remember it. It took 20 years before the first action of the civil society in the West, if I remember correctly, it was in Dublin, in Ireland. The first action of solidarity with the ANC, it took 20 years before the first government in the world was willing to impose some sort of sanctions on apartheid South Africa. So in that respect, I think there are similarities. The challenges are different. The possibilities of change are different, of course. But that is one historical lesson to be learned. Secondly, we are watching very, very carefully the continued economic apartheid in South Africa, and we want to learn from it when we are hoping to be active in the decolonization of Palestine, not to repeat the same mistake that South Africa did. So I think this covers the questions.
Thank you, Ilan. I see three more. Don, Susan Starkman, and Gord Doctorow. Let's go first Don, and then Susan, and then Gord.
First, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Ilan, for this session today. I read the book and believe I used the biblical phrase, I believe, help thou my unbelief. And there's, I've been to a couple of Palestinian activists lately in the West Bank, and after the Flag Day and all of that, some of them went out and faced down some of the young settlers from 10 and 11 years old on up to 18 and 20, who were saying, erase the Arabs, you will be gone. And that is the future. That may be the future. So I'm wondering, we're in a race against time. And if that's the future, if that's where the elections might be going in Israel next, and if the forces of these cracks that I really hope you're correct slow down at all, we're going to have a terrible situation. The Palestinians more and more will be expelled. There won't be that much left to rebuild the future Palestine. So I'd like to just have you comment on the time factor and the utter extremism of the direction Israel is going.
Thank you, Don. Susan?
Hello. Thank you, Ilan, for your courage. I want to talk about what sustains Israel, Elbit arms. A lot of the international community buy arms from Israel, and they have a vested interest in keeping Israel exactly as it is. And I don't think this is going away soon. Israel also is a technological powerhouse. It does it has, Arabic speaking spies who do intelligence in the region that they can sell. I mean, they are a powerhouse, and I don't think they're really going anywhere soon. I mean, can use any cracks in Israel as they aren't to the world. And the other thing I'd like to say is one of the things Israel's doing in Gaza is viciously trying to destroy Arab Palestinian culture, universities, libraries, archives. They really don't want. I mean, this is really horrific. Not talked about a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Gord, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. I very much appreciate this discussion. I'm calling from Toronto, Canada. I'm a member of Independent Jewish Voices. I'm on my second reading of the book. My first reading of the book struck me as that this is a long overdue conversation. We in the solidarity movement haven't had this kind of conversation before. And I'm so glad we're doing that today. So the question I have to Ilan is not so much about the particular book, but about the conversation. I want to know, how can I get Ilan to speak to an audience in Canada through Independent Jewish Voices so we can increase that conversation? It needs to be spread. We need to discuss this. That's my question.
Thank you. Let me start with Dawn. There is no doubt that there is here a tension between urgency and strategy. We were talking about strategy, but urgency is very much on my mind and everybody's mind, namely that even if I'm 100% correct about the processes of this integration, they will take time, and this is not anything you can take when you talk with Palestinians. And I said it, when you talk to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. This does not ensure that the next few months would be better just because these processes are taking place. So our role as an activist is to do all we can to accelerate the processes that we can. That's why I distinguish between processes that we can impact and processes where we have no bearing on them. And the process we have impact on them should be, we should double and triple our efforts, because Palestinians do not have the luxury of our despair. They don't have that luxury. We need to believe that this is possible. And the key is not necessarily the United States, by the way. If the EU would impose 50% of the sanction it imposes on Russia, on Israel, the lives of thousands of Palestinians would be saved. As simple as that. If UEFA, the European Football Association, would take Israel out of it, this would have a huge impact on Israel, much more than anything else that BDS has done until today. There are certain things that are possible, They haven't been achieved as yet, but they are possible. And they are not changing fundamentally the situation, but are creating a chance for taming, for slowing, decelerating everything that you have all described, which nobody denies, and absolutely uninhibited, unstoppable Israel would continue to do what it does today. But unlike you, probably because of my historical perspective, I don't think that a terrible fiasco like the one we have seen in Iran, for instance, goes unpunished. I don't believe in it. I think there will be consequences for that, and quite immediate consequences for that. This is not working. You can see the beginning of change in some countries with this kinds of politics. Not everywhere, I agree. But I do believe that this despair that also I feel about the urgent need to stop the trajectory that by itself, I think, would bring down the Zionist project. The trajectory is very violent and very destructive. I wish there was another trajectory in the making. So I always think that strategizing and urgent objectives can be contradictory, but both are very, very necessary. Both are very necessary. Secondly, about the arms industry, I think that we keep forgetting that an arm industry is a capitalist venture at the end of the day. And yes, it is true. Israel is very popular because it experiments with weapons on the Palestinians, and therefore there's always increase in the sales after every attack on Gaza. However, it's more complicated in certain countries, especially you can see it in Europe, to buy from Israel. And unfortunately, Israel is not the only source for developing weapons, for selling weapons, and there's less complication in buying weapons from other places. I'm not keen of this as being the process that would bring enlightenment and change in Palestine, but it's part of these processes which I think have to be accounted. Put differently, to all what you described about Israel as a powerhouse in terms of military and technological production, you have to continue and provide proof that Israel is an asset in capitalist terms and not a liability. What the last 2 years have shown to many people who are in the trade, in arms trade, and we could see it in the many exhibition of arms trades that Israel was expelled from, that arms trades with Israel makes it doubtful as a capitalist asset. This is another process that by itself doesn't change much, but I think would continue to happen, again, not because it's a kind of a moral issue that I would like to be involved in, but I can see the results in the numbers and the figures themselves. Finally, Gord, thank you for your kind words. Yes, definitely, I'm trying to also to have a Canadian tour. I will let you know. I'm sure this will happen next year sometime. And thank you. I see it as an invitation. I'm working with other organizations and individuals in Canada to go back. As you know, I've already been there, but I would like very much to come back, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilan. I see Sandy Leon and Peter Larson. Those are the two I see up there. Let's go with those right now.
Okay, Kathy.
Okay, I want to see if I understood you correctly. I think you said something about we would need a 1 million movement daily for the Palestinians, and I kind of lost the context. So if you could clarify that, please.
And Peter, and then I also see Kathy and Jerry Marketos. So Peter, you're up next, and then Kathy and Jerry.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm another Canadian crashing the party here. I do have a conundrum that I face, and I suspect that you face it as well, largely in the States. And that is that most of the progressive people who are very sympathetic to the situation of the Palestinians are still very much affected by liberal Zionism. They still default to the idea of a two-state solution, seeing that, focusing on the fact that one of those states would be a Palestinian state, but kind of passing by the fact that the other state would be a Jewish state forever and a day, which is quite at variance with what Ilan is putting forward. So I'd like to talk a bit about the challenge. Because all our churches, all our politicians, they all support that. And so even the people who are friends of Palestine are, I think, impeding the kind of analysis that Ilan is putting forward. Thanks very much.
Kathy and Jerry?
Okay. I was watching a video that was almost surreptitiously recorded in Greece of a coalition between Israeli expatriates and American government Zionist agents, and this sort of a common cause being created there. I guess you could say for me it scared me with a prospect of poor oppressed Israelis leaving and joining the poor oppressed whites leaving South Africa and coming to this country and joining forces with the people who are benefiting from the rigged tax laws and the paranoid nationalism that does so much damage. Not all of these people want to go to Mars. We're having the residue of the horrors that are going on in Palestine, and so looks like are we then faced with solving all the problems at once in order to in order to improve any of them?
Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you. The question about the 1 million, let me clarify. What I said is that it was impressive how, for instance, in Rome and in London, the solidarity movement was able to galvanize 1 million people with very different political opinions, different backgrounds in a march for Palestine. And I said this kind of coalition should be replicated as a political force, not just for a demonstration. Because when we try to work out as a political force, all these disputes between different parts that were able to join for one day of demonstration is not as easily replicated when we try to create a joint solidarity movement. We have to be more pragmatic. That was my point, in order to create a powerful coalition that would influence politics from above. Peter, the question of liberal Zionism is very important, although, of course, in Israel they don't exist almost anymore. They only exist in American and British Jewish community. It's a very strange situation. I don't believe we have liberal Zionists in Israel anymore. I mean, there are a few of them, but they are extinct species. And it's not surprising. I mean, the whole move to the right of the Israeli political system is the recognition that you cannot be both Jewish and democratic. And unfortunately, most of the Jewish electorate says if this is the case, and it is the case, they agree, we'd rather be Jewish as they understand what it means to be Jewish, and not democratic. And that's where the liberal Zionists are disappearing. I think what really is more important to my mind is not the liberal Zionist position on the two-state states. It's the Palestinian insistence on the two-state solution. The moment you will have a clear Palestinian position in support of the one-state solution, this position would be irrelevant, the position of the liberal Zionists. What they say now, which is fair, that's what the Palestinian Authority says. That's what the Palestinian politicians in Israel say. What do you want from us? You want us to be more pious than the Palestinians? And I think that's why we need a very strong change in the way the Palestinian national interest and vision is displayed, and that would also ease our challenge from the liberal Zionists. Kathy, the last point. Well, I do think that it's very difficult to totally predict a disintegration of a state, a collapse of a regime. We already see some, I don't want to call it a collateral damage, but if you talk to people in Cyprus and in Thailand and in Athens, where there are new Israeli communities with their own newspapers, with their own educational system, with their own schools, who are very much alienating the society with the way they behave, the way that they are in kind of economically impacting the reality in these places. Some of it evokes ugly nationalism, which nobody is happy about. In Thailand, for instance, very interesting. It's connected to the war with Cambodia that suddenly the Israelis are seen as aliens. But some of it is the kind of DNA that most Israelis have, given the way this country the state developed in the last 78 years. It's unavoidable. If you read my book, in my more imagined part of the book, I don't think this is a walk in a Rosengarten. We will. I do believe that the Palestinian resistance will continue. Do believe the Palestinians will be resilient, and I do believe we'll get there in the end. But we will get there scarred, wounded, with a lot of trials and tribulations. This is not going to be a smooth unpacking or untangling of something that is so powerful and so wrong in so many ways, undoubtedly. But I'm thinking about the younger generation. I think they have in front of them years in which they are not only going to see, as we all said, the next 3 or 4 years that of an escalation, but I think they're going to see also the result of that escalation. And that result would be for their benefit if they would know how to exploit that. I strongly believe in it. I strongly believe in it. And every evil regime, every chapter in history that was based on brutality came to an end. History is not linear. History is cyclic. And we are in a very bad cycle, not only in Palestine, but we should believe that this cycle is coming to a certain end, and that we have as humanity the ability to start a different cycle. Because if we don't have the ability, not only Gaza would be destroyed, our life on this planet will be destroyed. I mean, there's a connection between ecological justice, the issue of immigration, the issue of poverty, and a solution for Palestine. These are not disconnected issues. They are highly connected. And if we don't succeed in the one, we won't succeed in the other. And we have to believe, especially for the younger generation, that this is still savable, so to speak, that we can still do this, and they can still do it, more importantly than what we can do, than what they can do. Whenever I'm depressed, I'm talking to young Palestinians, and they really make me believe in the future. And I would just say that we're getting to the end. I've just finished editing a book with my dear friend Ramzi Baroud. I don't know if you know him, who lost 16 members of his family in Gaza, including his sister and his brother-in-law and other members of the family. And what we did, our book is called Gaza Rises. We collected contribution from young Palestinians in Gaza. You will read this book, you would not allow yourself to believe that all is lost and that there's no chance for liberation and freedom. If they believe in it, we should believe in it. And I do think this will happen. It will take time, but it will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilan. Kate, I see your hand.
Oh, no, just applause.
Okay, good. And Borhan, let me just ask if you have one final word as a prominent Palestinian voice in our midst. What would you like to say to Ilan and to all of us?
I'll tell you, at this time and with all the suffering happening, my family is in the West Bank, and I needed this encouragement. I needed to think that there will be light at the end of this tunnel. So I want to thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Burhan. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
Let's show our applause and appreciation to Ilan Pappé. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilan.
Continue the good work. Thank you.
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you so much, and see you soon, hopefully. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.